Hey there, grace and peace to you today. I'm Captain Roger McCord from the Salvation Army's Hanford Corps. Welcome to the Shield Online, our weekly worship and study time. Hey, if our story today was a movie, or if I was more adept at video podcasting, this would open with a shot of an oar dipping into the dark, still water of a lake just before sunrise. A handful of small boats, their sails hanging limply as their occupants rowed their way into an inlet between steep hills, heading for a small rocky beach just beneath the first rays of the dawning sun. The occupants of those boats would be silent, except for the muted calls required for them to land their craft safely and then pull them up from the unusually waveless expanse behind them. Jesus, lit by the sunrise, stood and stretched and hopped gently onto the shore, smiling at his companions as they climbed wearily out. It had been a rough night. First, because of the unexpected squall which had blasted them with a force beyond what any had expected. Many of them were experienced sailors who knew Galilee's penchant for sudden storms and would ordinarily have ridden them out without concern, but not last night. The winds had attacked with such ferocity that even the most stoic hand was convinced they would be swamped and lost in the dark waters rumored to be the home of evil spirits and the souls of the drowned. In their panic, they had woken the teacher, who'd somehow been sleeping through the toss, and he had stood up and told the waves and the wind to be still. And they had. The violent chop that had overwhelmed them simply vanished. The waters became as flat as the bronze surface of a polished mirror. And then he had chided gently the others for their fear, as if his very presence was supposed to reassure them no matter what the circumstances. The sea had calmed, but they were more than a little freaked out. And for the rest of the night, once they had recovered enough to do so, they rowed their way from the center of the lake to this landing on the eastern shore. They weren't even sure why they were coming here, and disciples went where they were led, but this was the opposite shore from their home port, and it wasn't exactly friendly territory. It wasn't enemy territory, but it wasn't friendly. This was on the edge of Decapolis, which is a collection of Greek cities that had been founded by descendants of Alexander's empire, and it was very definitely Gentile territory, filled with unclean people who practiced unclean things. Some of the fishermen had done a little trading in this area, but most had steered clear. It didn't pay to be too associated with places of questionable purity. That stigma could cling to someone after they had returned to the Holy Land. The teacher didn't seem concerned, though. Not even when they spotted the man running towards them from a small graveyard situated on a nearby hill. There was a moment of shock and murmuring among the disciples when they realized that the figure headed towards them wasn't wearing a loincloth or small clothes the way they'd thought. He was, in fact, quite naked, except for this heavy concentration of mud and grime streaked across what looked like every inch of his skin. The man's arms and legs were a mess of cuts and bruises, some oozing with age, others open and angry beneath their covering of dirt. But when the man reached the group at the beach, he immediately fell onto his knees in front of the teacher. "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" Kneeling before your betters was normal, and in their society, knowing your place was essential. And I am sure that the fishermen standing beside the boats, people who often would have been classified as lower rungs on the ladder of status in their community, I'm sure they were happy to see that this crazed creature knew that his place was beneath them. Except Jesus seemed to think otherwise. His look was unreadable, but his words suggested there was more here than the others saw. He said, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit," which meant that whatever this was, it wasn't what the others had thought. I should explain their view of the world was somewhat different from ours. Let's say that it was more personal, where we, most of us, see things like storms to be impersonal forces that blow where they will. In the first century, they believed all effects were caused by some person or persons, either human or inhuman. For example, if someone or their government or country did something that affected you, that was because of a human decision or the action of a human person. But things like wind or rain were obviously sent by a non-human person, be that a spirit or angel or the stars. And over all of these things, the gods ruled, and they made decisions which the beings below them needed to abide by or carry out. Now, most cultures considered their particular high god to be the most high god, the top authority who all others must obey. But beneath that person was a whole layer of higher beings, including lesser gods and celestial persons whose authority was almost as great. And then, beneath them, other non-human powers, the angels or demons of a spirit world that most people could never see. Then humans were the next rank down, subject to the whims of all those non-human spirits and gods above them when those gods allowed it. And then below us were animals, birds, fish, the things that are lower in the hierarchy of life and subject to our fancies and desires, just as we were thought to be subject to those above us. Indeed, most Jews believed unclean spirits had the power to distort and corrupt the image that the Lord God had placed in every human being, reducing them to animal behaviors and thoughts. If Jesus saw this filthy, wounded being before him to be a spirit, it should have meant that it was somehow higher status than a human could aspire to. But that person was kneeling and the teacher was issuing commands. That meant that Jesus was the higher authority. But he couldn't be, could he? Well, he had commanded the storm the night before. "Come out of this man, you impure spirit," he said. And the wretch before him cried out, "In God's name, don't torture me," as if the words of the teacher had burned him. And Jesus asked, "What is your name?" "Legion, for we are many." Now, I don't know whether this was an answer or an evasion. Names have power. And the Greek world believed that the names of demons could be used in rites that would bind them so that they could be forced to behave or be gone. Each spirit had its own name, though, so calling a collective legion is not really a proper answer to the question. Now, I'm sure you've noticed, so I freely confess, I have a bias towards believing in the supernatural, but I know that not everyone does, and I could be wrong. But I think we can all agree that there are demons which plague many lives, even if you only believe in those that you can see, identify, and quantify. Alcoholism, addiction, abuse, anger, trauma, these are all demons which can take hold in a person and lead them to relinquish their humanity in favor of animalistic urges and instincts. Selfishness, greed, unchecked craving to possess more than you need. These are all demons which, when fed, multiply like gremlins in our lives until they rule, driving us deeper and deeper into depraved indifference and self-destructive choices. I might even say that we all have our demons to deal with, perhaps some that gnaw only at our own souls, but most of which grow and encourage us to share them with others. What's that saying? Hurt people hurt people? Isn't that just an effort to deal with the demon of your pain by forcing the seeds of similar pain into another person's life, where they're going to sprout into their very own spirit of anguish and self-loathing? I prefer supernatural demons to psychological ones. Supernatural kinds must come from something outside trying to cause us harm. But the demons we grow within ourselves are a self-inflicted spirit of meanness that we use to drag ourselves and others away from who we were created to be to something less. And who wants to accept blame for the harm they bring into the world? It's so much easier to claim the devil made me do it, right? Demons don't leave easily, whatever they may be. And the ones controlling that man on his knees before Jesus were no different. Again and again, they cried out that Jesus not send them away. Are some demons stronger in certain places or areas, or more accepted and therefore easier to hang on to grow and to spread than in others? Bill W., one of the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous, pointed out that a recovering alcoholic who makes his home in a bar is inviting the demons he had rid himself of to return. At this beach, on a hillside nearby, grazing on what they could find was a large herd of pigs. It wasn't something seen in Israel. They were unclean animals according to the law of Moses, and by the time of Jesus, pigs had become considered a symbol for unholiness. Jewish people avoided them, whether they were alive or bacon, because they were unclean. Those demons, begging not to be sent away, not to be sent into the abyss, they implored Jesus, "Oh, let us go into the pigs, let us go into the pigs." And he said yes. And then this giant herd of swine, about 2,000 of them, stampeded down the steep slope into the lake where they drowned. As you might expect, this was not something the men responsible for tending the pigs were prepared for. They ran towards town to get someone, anyone, to come back and see for themselves what had happened to those animals. I should tell you something more about the man who had been possessed. He was well known in town. You know, people notice when someone in a small community begins to act in antisocial ways, like walking around without pants. There were some definite ideas about when someone's abnormal behavior was to be considered utter madness, something that would cause that person to become completely ostracized. If someone tore their clothes or walked around in ripped clothing, that was a sign. So was a tendency to walk around at night. Troubling, right? A third thing was destroying things of others. And absolutely a capper, and probably enough by itself to flip someone into the "there's no hope for them" category, spending a night at a tomb. And our man fit all four of those. Now, it's not like the people in town hadn't tried to deal with him. They had seized him before. They'd tried to restrain him. They even chained him up, probably trying to keep him away from, the other more normal people. But he was violent and strong, and he would either tear the chains apart or escape and break them off. And he wandered around talking to himself, screaming, using sharp stones to harm himself, probably threatening others at times. The people feared him and his demons. And as the pig herds brought help back from town, as all those people got to that area to see what the situation was, they saw something that was baffling and terrifying. That madman, that lunatic, that insane person who lived in the graveyard, who screamed, who hurt himself, who broke his chains, who terrified the people of the town if they came near, that madman was there with a crowd of Galileans in their boats. But he wasn't screaming. He wasn't even naked. Someone had helped clean him up. Bandages had been applied to some of his wounds. Dirt had been wiped from his face and his limbs. He looked human. Well, hundreds of dead pigs bobbed gently along the edge of the lake. He was talking to the one who seemed to be in charge of this small group of Jews who had invaded their shores. What's going on? They asked, trying to take it all in, trying to keep some distance between themselves and the crazy man. Some of the Galileans and herdsmen told him this fantastic tale about demons and pigs and Jesus. And they described how the man had knelt before the teacher, before the pigs rushed into the lake. And they said that after that, the teacher had helped him up. And the man had washed while the visitors found him clothing and shoes to wear from within their own stock. And they oiled and bound his hurts. And now he sat with the teacher, listening to what was said, answering when he was asked, and absolutely not doing any of the things that the townspeople knew he usually did. Which was good and all, they supposed, but their eyes would have kept being drawn back to the water. And their pigs, all dead. If that was because of the demons, the man must have had a lot of them to deal with. But why their pigs? Shouldn't the man have stayed like he was? I mean, he was only hurting himself, right? His demons were surely his problem. Why should they have to give anything up to help him? He simply should have fixed himself. This was that teacher's fault, wasn't it? He made the demons kill the pigs. Isn't that what they were hearing? Well, I suppose it was what they were hearing, even though it wasn't how the story went. But they were angry. How dare this outsider come and try to fix things that were just fine by them? This was going to cost them a lot of money. They had already decided that this crazy man was not something they were willing to deal with. That's why the guy lived out here in the graveyard. It's not like he was a person. He was nothing more than an animal. I mean, where are your priorities? Why save this guy if it's going to be so expensive for the rest of them? Could one man's life be worth more than a whole herd of pigs? And that's when they started to demand that Jesus get back in his boat and go. Just go, get out of there, take his radical people are more important than money nonsense back where he came from. And Jesus, as he usually did when folks objected to and refused his message that people should be loved and cared for no matter who they were or what they seemed to be, Jesus shook the dust off his sandals, wished them well, climbed into the boat, and left. The man who had been delivered from his demons, he asked, no, more than that, he begged Jesus to take him with. After all, the whole crowd in those boats, they were disciples, right? He could be a disciple too. He could. He would do whatever it took to be with the one who'd given him his life back. And Jesus looked at him with that deep, compassionate, caring look, and he said, go home. Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. And then Jesus climbed into the boat and told them to sail back to Israel, and he sat down on a cushion in the stern and fell asleep to the gentle rocking of the waves as the wind came up to push them home. The man, seeing that he wasn't going to be welcome here, now that he was in his right mind with his demons dealt with, he headed off. And over the next months and years, he shared his message. Oh, it wasn't quite the message he had been told to share, or maybe it was. I guess it depends on what you read into the instruction he was given. What did Jesus say? Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. We're told that the man went through all of Decapolis, every city and town, and he shared exactly how much Jesus had done for him. And we're told that all the people who heard about the mercy of the Lord were amazed. You know what? I'm going to stop right there. I think there is a lot in what was just said in this story that we find in several places in the Gospels. There's a lot to process. Think about it. And hey, while you're doing that, remember, you have nothing to fear. Because wherever you are, whatever circumstance or situation you find yourself in, God is with you. There is nowhere you can be that God isn't already there. Just turn and go with God. Grace and peace to each and every one of you in the coming week. See you next time.